The story opens during an intense American football game, where we find Nikki relaxing in the premium seating area alongside his companion Jess, while the action unfolds on the field below. Nikki's attention drifts away from the players and toward the spectators round them, his eyes track an attractive woman as she rises from her seat and begins making her way toward the exit. A playful spark ignites in his mind, and he turns to Jess with an unusual proposition. He suggests they place a wager on how many heads will turn to watch this woman as she passes by. A nearby gentleman named Lewin overhears their conversation and expresses interest in joining their little game. Nikki welcomes him aboard without hesitation. The three of them each throw $10 into the pot and begin their count with amusement. As the woman makes her way through the crowd, they carefully tally each person who glances back at her. The final count reaches 7 people, and Jess comes closest with her prediction. Claiming the modest winnings, Lewin hands over the cash with good humor and immediately proposes escalating their entertainment. His next challenge involves predicting which player will be penalized next during the match. Jess decides to sit this round out, admitting her limited knowledge of football's intricacies. But Nikki eagerly accepts and raises the stakes to $1,000. The referee's whistle pierces the air almost immediately, and the penalty falls exactly on the team Nikki predicted. He collects his winnings with satisfaction and casually pockets the money, rather than being discouraged by his loss. Lewin's enthusiasm intensifies. He proposes doubling down with a $5,000 wager, centered on whether the quarterback will choose to pass the football or attempt to advance it himself. Nikki pauses briefly, weighing the significant amount at stake, before ultimately nodding in agreement. Lewin confidently predicts the player will run, while Nikki counters that a pass is coming. The whistle sounds again, and the quarterback tucks the ball and charges forward, which means Nikki has just lost $5,000. He takes a moment to process this setback and suggests they call it quits for the day. He invites Jess to join him for coffee, ready to walk away from the betting. But Lewin refuses to let the moment end. He reminds Nikki that he's sitting in the VIP section with obviously deep pockets, so why should he let a mere $5,000 ruin his afternoon? He pushes for another round, this time proposing $10,000 on the line, despite his reservations. Nikki finds himself agreeing once more. The new bet focuses on whether the upcoming pass will connect successfully. Nikki believes it will, but the opposing team intercepts the ball mid-flight. Nikki has now dropped $15,000 total as he reaches for his wallet. Frustration begins clouding his judgment. He pauses for just a moment before announcing his intention to bet $50,000 on the next play. Jess reacts with visible shock at this dramatic escalation, but Nikki's expression has hardened with determination and wounded pride. His luck continues its downward spiral as he loses yet again, forcing him to hand over another $50,000 to his smirking opponent. Jess desperately urges him to stop this madness immediately. But Nikki's ego has taken control of his decision-making. Without any rational thought guiding him, he declares his next bet will be $100,000. Lewin bursts into laughter and mockingly questions whether Nikki actually possesses that kind of cash. In response, Nikki silently produces a thick stack of currency and slaps it onto the table between them. This display of wealth only excites Lewin further, and he eagerly accepts the challenge. Nikki predicts the next pass will be broken up and incomplete, but the throw finds its target perfectly. $100,000 evaporates from Nikki's bankroll in an instant. He sits frozen, unable to comprehend how deeply he's fallen into this trap. Jess watches him with a mixture of disbelief and concern. But the game has reached a critical turning point. Nikki announces that he has $1 million remaining and proposes wagering the entire amount on a final showdown. This time they'll settle matters with a simple card draw. Letting fate decide the outcome, Lewin has been riding an incredible winning streak. And his confidence has transformed into arrogance. He now views Nikki as nothing more than a personal cash machine. Lewin draws his card first, revealing a 5 of clubs. Nikki only needs to draw anything higher than 5 to win, giving him favorable odds mathematically. He reaches for a card and flips it over with theatrical confidence, but his face falls when he sees the 3 of hearts staring back at him. Jess's reaction is so extreme that she literally tumbles from her chair in shock. What began as a casual $10 bet has spiraled into a devastating loss of over $1 million. The humiliation weighs heavily on Nikki's shoulders, and he finds himself speechless in the face of such a catastrophic defeat. He quietly takes Jess's hand and begins walking toward the exit, hoping to escape this nightmare. However, Lewin can't resist twisting the knife deeper. He calls after them with mocking words, saying this is what happens when amateurs challenge a true master. Something inside Nikki snaps at these words, and he abruptly stops in his tracks. He turns round and announces another bet, this time for $2 million. The terms of this wager are completely different from anything they've done before. Nikki proposes that Lewin can select any random player on the field using his binoculars, and if Nikki can correctly identify that player's jersey number, he wins everything. Lewin's confidence wavers slightly at this strange proposal. The entire concept seems to border on mind reading or psychic prediction. He begins suspecting that Nikki might be attempting some form of deception or trickery to recover his losses. To eliminate any doubt about cheating, Nikki makes a surprising modification to the terms. He announces that he won't make the guess himself. Instead, Jess will provide the answer. Jess turns to Nikki with anger flashing in her eyes. Completely bewildered by what's happening, she protests that among thousands of people in the stadium, how could she possibly identify one specific jersey number correctly? She attempts to walk away from this insanity, but Lewin's security guard physically blocks her path, leading to a tense confrontation. Jess forces herself to calm down and catch her breath. Nikki tells her simply to scan the field and call out whichever number feels right to her instinctively. Lewin lifts the binoculars to his eyes and carefully selects a player at random. Jess then takes the binoculars and begins sweeping her gaze across the entire playing field. Jersey numbers fill her vision everywhere she looks, creating an overwhelming sea of digits. How could anyone make an accurate guess under these circumstances? Then something catches her attention, a face she recognizes among the players. She suddenly remembers Nikki's earlier instruction to choose the number that feels like it belongs to her. Their friend Farhad is down on that field wearing jersey number 55. In that instant, Jess understands that everything unfolding round her has been choreographed as part of an elaborate scheme. She speaks the number 55 with confidence, and the binoculars confirm it's the correct answer. Lewin stands completely stunned, unable to process what just occurred. Jess also finds herself wondering how Nikki could have known which play Lewin would randomly select. But those questions can wait for later because they've just won the bet decisively. They collect $1 million in profit and recover all their previous losses in one spectacular reversal. Both of them exit the stadium carrying two large bags stuffed with cash. Once they're safely in the car, Nikki explains everything to Jess. Every single moment had been carefully orchestrated. They'd been studying Lewin's behavior for a long time, turns out. Lewin had a reputation in elite circles for a serious gambling problem. He just couldn't resist any bet, no matter the terms. Nikki's team spent weeks setting up this elaborate con. From the moment Lewin left his hotel, the number 55 was systematically planted into his subconscious. The security guard's badge had 55 on it. Every billboard and sign on the way to the stadium featured that same number, but they didn't just use visual cues, they used audio triggers too. A special song played in his car, repeating the number 55 in its lyrics over 124 times. This created an unconscious fixation. They even showed him a picture of Farhad earlier, creating a visual memory link. So, when Lewin looked through those binoculars, his subconscious mind naturally focused on number 55. And when Jess saw Farhad on the field, she instinctively called out 55, just as they predicted. Jess was kept in the dark about all these details to ensure her reactions were completely genuine, so no one would ever suspect she was part of the scheme. After hearing it all, Jess is just blown away by the sheer sophistication of Nikki's operation. Let's rewind to a few days earlier. Nikki is lying on a bed in a dimly lit room. Jess, whom he'd just met, is sitting beside him, and a stranger is pointing a loaded gun at his head. It was clear someone had set him up, but Nikki showed no fear at all. He calmly told the gunman he didn't have a cent, so if he was going to shoot, he should just get it over with. The gunman studied Nikki's composure and realized he was dealing with someone exceptionally clever, maybe even more cunning than himself. And he was right. Nikki was a master con artist, specializing in sophisticated scams. Jess had lured Nikki to that room, but in her deception, Nikki saw raw talent. Jess had no idea what was really happening. After the gunman left, Nikki told her she had a genuine gift for deception. If she honed that skill, she could live a very comfortable life. He explained that running cons was his family's legacy, passed down through generations. Deception was in their blood. Every scam was just an intricate game. Without hesitating, Jess pulled out some money and asked Nikki to teach her everything he knew. He accepted immediately, as they were about to leave. Nikki smoothly lifted one of Jess's rings without her noticing. By the time she realized it was gone, her wristwatch had also vanished. When she checked her handbag for the watch, she found her wallet was gone too. After demonstrating these tricks, Nikki shared his philosophy. Sleight of hand, perfect timing, and a touch of style are all you need. With that, he said goodbye and walked away. Several months later, Jess tracks Nikki down in New Orleans. He's putting together a new crew. Their reunion is actually a carefully designed test. He wanted to see if Jess had what it took to join his professional team. When Jess agreed to prove herself, Nikki sent her to a crowded festival with one of his experienced crew members. This was her first field test. She approached tourists with a map, asking for directions. While she kept them distracted, her partner discreetly removed an expensive camera lens from her tourist's bag. Another team member then bumped into a businessman, and in the confusion, Jess smoothly lifted his wallet. With each successful theft, Jess grew more confident, developing her own style. Using a pair of chopsticks, she managed to pull a woman's wallet from her purse without any contact. Everything went so smoothly that none of the victims suspected a thing. From a nearby rooftop, Nikki watched through binoculars. He told the team to stand back and let Jess work alone. Now was her time to shine. She proceeded to steal one valuable item after another with increasing boldness. Nikki's respect for her grew with each successful lift. He then assigned her a more complex, high-tech operation. Using special contact lenses, they could see other poker players' cards. They also ran a sophisticated credit card theft ring. A stolen card would be secretly passed to a teammate, who used a device to clone its data before returning it to the owner's pocket. By the time the victim noticed, their entire bank account would be drained. Another scheme involved a fake ATM. When someone withdrew cash, the machine recorded their PIN. Farhad would later remove the machine and extract the data. All the stolen credit cards were categorized by their limits. They used them to buy expensive luxury goods, and the card data itself was sold on underground black markets. One afternoon, Jess spotted a beautiful necklace and put it on. Nikki immediately told her to take it off. He explained that every single item must be sold. Nothing could be kept for a personal use. This was Jess's first real look at fraud on such a massive scale, standing in a warehouse full of stolen merchandise was overwhelming. The next day, Jess and Farhad went to scout a wealthy neighborhood. Their job involved street theater. Farhad suddenly collapsed on the sidewalk, and Jess started screaming for help. This commotion was the perfect cover for the rest of the team to move through the crowd, picking pockets and stealing from the wealthy onlookers. Once the job was done, the entire crew escaped in a waiting ambulance. The plan was so perfect that nobody could piece together what had happened. That evening, the team celebrated. Nikki congratulated everyone. They'd made $1.2 million in just 7 days. The next morning, the team prepared to go their separate ways. Nikki destroyed all documents and assured everyone their share would be transferred soon. But the veteran crew members knew Nikki still had one last big score planned. The following morning, Nikki brought Jess to the VIP lounge at the football stadium. He walked her through a demonstration of how they could earn $1 million in just a few minutes. By this point, Jess had developed strong romantic feelings for Nikki. She thought she was his girlfriend and that he was sharing these secrets out of love. But Nikki had only brought her into the operation because she was useful. When it was all over, he handed her $80,000 in cash and said his final goodbye. Jess looked at him, tears in her eyes. Her heart was shattered. She had genuinely fallen in love with him. And that $80,000 felt like an insult after he'd just made $1 million. But in Nikki's world, emotions have no place in business. Jess had finally seen his true colors. Nearly 3 years pass. A sleek race car pulls into a service station. We see Nikki again. He looks exhausted, and it's clear his financial situation has taken a nosedive. During a lunch meeting, he sits down with George, who owns a professional racing team. George's technical staff had developed a new performance algorithm called EXR. But he wanted to refine it further to maximize his competitive advantage. That's why he hired Nikki to help execute a scheme. The plan was straightforward in concept. Nikki would pose as their chief engineer and technical consultant. Then they would stage a very public and dramatic falling out between George and Nikki so rival teams would take notice. After that, Nikki would sell a corrupted version of the EXR algorithm to their competition while George's team used the authentic system to dominate the races as compensation for his role. Nikki would receive €1 million. Plus he could keep whatever money he earned from selling the fake system. Nikki considered this job almost insultingly easy. He could pull off this type of scam without breaking a sweat. However, George's personal butler didn't trust Nikki at all. He issued a direct threat, warning that if Nikki attempted any double-cross, he'd put a bullet in his chest without hesitation. That evening, Nikki dressed in an elegant tuxedo and headed to an exclusive party. The plan called for Nikki and George to stage a convincing fake argument in front of the crowd, but their scheme completely unraveled when Jess appeared descending the staircase wearing a stunning red dress. She walked directly to George and embraced him warmly. Witnessing this scene, Nikki's eyes filled with rage and jealousy. His mind went completely blank. He hadn't seen Jess in 3 years, and now she was with another man. Specifically with the man who had just hired him. Jess calmly approached Nikki and told him that she'd left the con artist life behind, and whatever happened 3 years ago was ancient history. She also mentioned that George knew nothing about their past relationship, and it needed to stay that way. Hearing these words pushed Nikki over the edge. He grabbed a glass of vodka and downed it in one aggressive gulp. Originally, he'd planned to fake anger during their staged fight, but now his fury was completely genuine. The confrontation with George in front of all the party guests was no longer an act. It was real emotion exploding. Their very public argument attracted exactly the kind of attention they needed from rival racing teams. Security guards soon arrived and physically ejected Nikki from the party. But he now possessed the business card of their main competitor. The next morning, Nikki arranged a meeting with the owner of the McLaren racing team. He spoke bluntly and directly. He wanted to sell them the EXA system for €3 million. The team owner had unlimited resources, so there was no need for a negotiation. He immediately tested the system on their private track, and when he saw the performance results, his face lit up with satisfaction. Nikki promised that the complete software package would be delivered within 48 hours. Meanwhile, Jess had an unexpected encounter with Farhad on the street. Farhad had been sent by Nikki specifically to find her. He explained to Jess that Nikki had no choice but to leave 3 years ago. Circumstances forced his hand. Farhad also revealed that Nikki still loved her deeply. Then he presented Jess with a small box containing the same necklace she'd admired years earlier. Whether it was the original or a replica didn't matter in that moment. Jess's heart softened when she saw it. She told Farhad that she couldn't trust Nikki again. But her eyes betrayed her true feelings. She still cared for him deeply. On the scheduled day of the transaction, Nikki arrived and handed over the software to the McLaren team owner. In exchange, a large intimidating man gave him a briefcase containing €3 million, but taking unnecessary risks was fundamental to Nikki's nature. He'd secretly sold copies of the identical software to every single racing team in the competition. Every handshake represented millions more euros flowing into his accounts. Each person who shook his hand was paying him a fortune, until the actual race began. Nobody had any idea that every team possessed the exact same EXA algorithm. That night, instead of fleeing immediately, Nikki sent a message to Jess saying that if she came quickly, they could escape together and start fresh. Nikki waited anxiously, but nobody appeared. Just as he gave up hope and turned to leave, Jess finally arrived. But their timing couldn't have been worse. At that exact moment, the same large man who'd delivered €3 million on behalf of the McLaren team appeared, blocking Nikki's path. In reality, this man worked for George all along. He'd uncovered the truth that Nikki had sold the authentic software instead of the fake version. The money didn't matter to him anymore. Now, wearing his full racing gear, he deliberately crashed his vehicle into Nikki's car at high speed after the horrific accident. Both Nikki and Jess were captured and restrained. They were tied up securely while all the stolen cash was spread out in front of George for inspection. George was absolutely furious. He'd invested €40 million developing that software. And now, his entire operation was compromised. The worst part was he still couldn't understand how Nikki had stolen the authentic algorithm. When Nikki remained silent, George pinched Jess's nose shut, cutting off her air supply completely. Seeing Jess suffer broke Nikki's resolve. He confessed everything in a rush. He explained how he'd manipulated Jess's emotions by rekindling their old romance. He admitted, giving her that same necklace she'd once desired, but this time it contained a hidden chip. As soon as George opened the software on his computer, that chip transmitted his password and copied all the data. Jess felt her heart breaking as she listened to this confession. Tears streamed down her face, but George and his men started laughing at the story. They enjoyed the narrative but didn't believe any of it was true. George then revealed that Jess was never actually his girlfriend. He knew she was only with him to steal from his valuable watch collection. Jess confirmed this, admitting she'd been pretending to love George solely to gain access to his expensive watches. Now Nikki was the one feeling shocked. Jess had faked her relationship with George to make Nikki jealous. Both of them were now trapped in this situation together. George turned to his butler and demanded to know how Nikki actually managed to steal the software. As Nikki opened his mouth to answer, the butler suddenly fired his weapon. The bullet struck Nikki directly in the chest. George's face went pale with panic. He told the butler that money could be earned again, but a murder charge would destroy everything. George quickly fired the butler and fled the warehouse in terror. Jess sobbed uncontrollably, but the butler remained completely calm. He told her there was no reason to worry. He was actually working for Nikki. In truth, this butler was Nikki's father. He'd fired the bullet with surgical precision, hitting near the heart but not through it. He quickly sealed the wound with medical tape, used a needle to draw out excess blood and balanced the air pressure in Nikki's chest cavity. Suddenly, Nikki's eyes opened. He was alive. It was an insane plan, but it worked flawlessly. Behind them lay an enormous pile of money. All three of them walked out of that warehouse. Together, Nikki was actually an orphan who'd been raised by this man. He was the one who taught Nikki every trick and technique of the con artist trade. Their fundamental rule was simple: never let emotions cloud your judgment. But now Nikki had truly fallen in love with Jess. The butler left both of them on the roadside and drove away with all the money. Nikki was left with absolutely nothing. But on their way to the hospital, he noticed something shining on Jess's wrist. It was George's watch worth $200,000. Nikki looked at Jess. Jess looked back at Nikki. And both of them broke into smiles. With skills like these and their mastery of sleight of hand, they would never go hungry no matter where they ended up in this world.